Today's tech news moves fast, but understanding it shouldn't be hard. That's why Snarful Solutions Group brings you Connecting the Dots, where we break down what's happening in tech and why it matters to you. Now, let's dive in with your hosts.
Let's dive into the sources you sent over.
Yeah, got quite a stack here.
Our mission today is pretty clear. Cut through the noise, pull out the key insights, the facts, the implications from all this material.
And we've got three really interesting, though, kind of different topics today.
Exactly. First, the latest on Chime's IPO plan. Then some pretty mind-blowing stuff on brain-computer interfaces, Paradromics, Neuralink.
Right. And finally, Amazon facing regulatory heat over in Germany.
Seemingly separate, but they all show different angles on how tech's shaping things. We'll unpack what the sources say, find the surprises, and figure out why it matters to you.
It's quite a snapshot, isn't it? Fintech, biotech, regulation, all moving so fast.
Definitely underscores the challenges and the opportunities in 2025. Let's start with Chime.
Okay, Chime, the neobank. Big player in digital banking. The sources are packed with details on their plan to go public, their initial public offering.
Right, the IPO. And the filings you shared, they lay out the plan pretty clearly. Chime and some existing shareholders, they want to sell shares.
Yeah, aiming to raise a decent chunk of capital, up to, what was it, around $832 million?
That's the potential ceiling, yeah. They're looking to offer about 32 million shares.
And the price range they're floating is $24 to $26 per share.
What stood out to me from the filing docs was that over 6 million of those shares are from existing shareholders cashing out of it, not just new shares from Chime itself.
Interesting. So based on that pricing, the sources crunch the numbers on valuation. Fully diluted, including all potential shares like options. It lands somewhere between $10.3 billion and $11.1 billion. Though one source points out, if you just look at the basic outstanding shares listed, it's closer to $9.47 billion.
Okay, so let's be real. $11 billion, that's still a massive number.
Absolutely.
But, and this is but the sources emphasize, it's way down from their peak valuation back in 2021. That was $25 billion.
Yeah, that's a significant drop. And it really speaks volumes about how investor sentiment has shifted.
Yeah, totally. The whole growth at any cost thing for fintech, that seems to be over. Now it's about showing a path to profit, or actually being profitable.
And Chime's filing gives us a good look under the hood there. Q1 2025, they reported, $518.7 million in revenue.
And crucially.
And $12.9 million in net income profit.
That's the key number. And the revenue was up too, right? 32% year over year for that quarter.
It was. And looking back at the full year, 2024 makes the trend even clearer. $2.1 billion in revenue, which was a 38% jump from 2023.
Okay, and the bottom line for 2024?
They really tightened things up. The net loss dropped dramatically from $203 million in 2023 down to just $25 million in 2024.
Right. I saw one source kind of called the Silicon Valley math, suggesting, with that profitable Q1, they're basically there or very close to consistent profitability.
Seems like it. It's a narrative shift they needed.
So who are their customers? The sources paint a picture, don't they?
Yeah, very specific focus. 8.6 million active users, 18 million total accounts. And they're really going after the digital native crowd, mobile first, especially Gen Z.
And the engagement numbers seem pretty high.
They do. Like 78% log in daily. That's huge.
Yeah.
And 43% use that early paycheck access feature. High interaction is key for them.
Makes sense. And they're spending big to get those users, apparently.
Oh, yeah. $518 million on marketing in 2024. A lot of that aimed squarely at grabbing that younger demographic.
Okay, but here's a potential catch the sources highlight, their business model.
Right. Heavily reliant on interchange fees.
Yeah.
The slice they get when you use your Chime debit card.
And how much of their revenue is that?
In 2024, it was 76%, which, interestingly, is actually down a bit from 80% 2 years before, but still,
yeah,
it's the vast majority.
And that's flagged as a risk.
Definitely. Big time. Any regulatory changes to interchange fees could hit their main revenue stream hard.
And there's another risk mentioned, too, about the users themselves.
Yeah, the younger user base. While they're engaged, they typically have lower average balances compared to, say, traditional bank customers. That impacts the revenue per user.
So the timing of this IPO, it feels pretty deliberate, doesn't it? Coming now.
Absolutely strategic. It's seen as a big test case for the whole fintech market, especially after that valuation cool-down period.
The sources mention a couple of contextual things, too, like President Trump's tariff policies may be influencing market mood.
Right. potential ripples there.
Yeah.
And also the timing just weeks after eToro, another fintech, had a successful debut. Seems like they saw an opening.
Adjusting the waters, maybe?
Could be. And they've got the big Wall Street names backing them. Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan underwriting the deal. That signals confidence.
And reminds us how much private money they've already raised. What was the total?
$2.65 billion over the years from a long list of investors named in the sources. They've been well-funded privately.
Now, okay, there was this one surprising detail dug out of the filing, something about basketball.
Yeah. The Dallas Mavericks sponsorship. $33 million spent between 2022 and 2024. Including the Chime logo right on the jerseys.
$33 million, that's not small change.
Not at all. And one source did the math, suggesting that without that expense, Chime might actually have already shown a profit for the full year 2024.
Wow, really highlights how hard they pushed on marketing and brand recognition.
Very sure.
So, putting all this together from the sources, the valuation reality check, the path to profit, the focus on Gen Z, the interchange risk, even the Mavs deal,
Yeah.
what's the takeaway for you, the listener?
Well, it's more than just one company's IPO, right? It's a real barometer for fintech. Shows that shifts from just growth to needing profitability.
And it gives you a window into how these digital banks operate, their strategies for targeting younger people, and the potential bumps in the road.
Exactly. A look at the state of digital banking right now.
Okay, let's pivot from digital money to, well, directly interacting with the brain. The sources you sent take us into brain-computer interfaces, BCIs, updates from Paradromics and Neuralink.
Yeah, this is really cutting-edge stuff. Let's start with Paradromics. Big news from them, according to the sources. Their first human test.
When did that happen?
Just recently, May 14th.
And what was interesting about how they did this test?
It was temporary, very temporary. They inserted their Connexus implant, but only for about 10 minutes.
10 minutes.
Yeah, during a scheduled epilepsy surgery at the University of Michigan. The patient was already undergoing brain surgery and consented to this extra brief procedure.
Fascinating. And what's the ultimate goal for Paradromics with this tech?
It's about restoring communication. For people with severe paralysis from things like spinal cord injury, stroke, ALS, the idea is to translate neural signals directly into, say, synthesized speech or text or controlling a cursor.
And the device itself, the sources described it.
Yeah, tiny, smaller than a dime, but packed with 420 little needles or electrodes that push just slightly into the brain tissue.
Wow, how do they insert it?
Apparently using something like an EpiPen, an instrument designed for that precise small insertion.
And their rationale from the CEO, why this approach?
They believe recording from individual neurons gives you the really high-fidelity signal you need for complex tasks like decoding speech accurately.
Makes sense.
And they argued the risk of this brief test was pretty low, given the patient was already having major neurosurgery, sometimes involving removing brain tissue anyway.
That's an important point the sources clarify too, right? These things aren't reading your thoughts.
Exactly. Crucial distinction. They're interpreting neural signals linked to intended movements, like the brain signals when you try to move your facial muscles to speak, even if you physically can't.
So it's about intent, not inner monologue.
Right. And the sources mentioned this ties into recent progress from places like Stanford and UCSF, showing really fast speech decoding is possible with BCIs.
Okay, so that's Paradromics cautious, temporary first step. Then there's Neuralink, Elon Musk's company, different strategy.
Yeah, they went for the longer-term implant right away. Their first patient, Nolan Darbaugh, got his implant back in January.
He's the one we saw playing video games with his mind.
That's him. Mario Kart, controlling computers. Their device is different to quarter size with 64 very fine wire threads that go into the motor cortex.
But it hasn't all been smooth sailing, according to the sources.
No, they hit a snag. Some of those fine wire threads actually retracted, pulled back a bit weeks after they were implanted.
Pulled back? What did that do?
It reduced the signal quality they could get from the brain. Fewer electrodes making good contact.
And there was some concerning reports about whether Neuralink knew this might happen.
Yeah, the sources cite reports, based on anonymous sources, claiming Neuralink might have known about this retraction for years before the trial even started.
And the FDA.
The sources say the FDA was reportedly informed before approving the trial, but the FDA itself hasn't commented on that specific point.
So how did Neuralink handle this retraction issue with Nolan?
Well, they compensated apparently by making their software algorithms more sensitive to pick up the remaining signals, and they reported his threads have stabilized now.
And for their second patient, there's news on that too.
Yes, a patient named Alex. implanted in July, based on a later update. For Alex, Neuralink took steps during the surgery to try and prevent retraction.
Like what?
Things like reducing brain motion during the procedure, making the gap between the implant and the brain surface smaller.
And did it work?
So far, so good, according to the update mentioned in the sources. No thread retraction observed in Alex yet.
And Alex is already using it effectively.
Apparently so. The sources mention him using it with a joystick to play Counter-Strike 2 better, and even using CAD software to design a 3D printed mount for his charger. Pretty amazing.
Wow. And Neuralink's ambitions are huge, right?
Oh, yeah. They talk about full mouse and controller emulation, decoding handwriting intent for faster typing, and eventually interacting with the physical world, moving robotic arms, wheelchairs.
It's incredible potential, but the sources also bring in a note of caution.
Absolutely. The promise for people with disabilities is described as enormous, but there's a strong emphasis on not scrimping on safety.
Because you're putting something in the brain.
Exactly. Risks if wires detach or if implants need to be removed later down the line. It's complex.
So looking at both Paradromic's approach and Neuralink's journey, what does this tell you, the listener?
Well, it shows a field just rocketing forward, really pushing the boundaries of human capability and human-machine interaction.
It offers genuine hope for restoring function for people with devastating conditions.
Definitely. But it also throws these huge ethical and safety questions right into the spotlight, doesn't it? Integrating tech directly with our brains. Some profound stuff.
Okay, final pivot. Third topic from the sources takes us into the world of big tech regulation, specifically Amazon in Germany.
Right. The headline here is, Germany's Competition Authority, the Federal Cartel Office, or FCO, has put Amazon on notice.
On notice for what?
They've issued preliminary findings, basically a warning, saying they think Amazon's methods for controlling prices set by third-party sellers on its marketplace probably break German and EU law.
And this is tied to some new powers the German regulator has.
It's exactly. Germany updated its competition laws back in 2021, sections 19A and 19B, specifically to deal better with dominant digital companies.
So these laws give the FCO more teeth.
Yeah, they allow faster intervention against stuff like a platform favoring its own products or unfairly restricting third-party sellers, things that are hard to tackle with older laws.
And Germany's kind of leading the charge here.
It seems that way. The sources point out this German law is quite similar to the big Pan-EU Digital Markets Act, the DMA, that's coming online. So what Germany's doing now could be a preview for big tech across Europe.
So what specific Amazon practices are they looking at under these new powers?
They're extending two existing investigations. One is about Amazon potentially using algorithms to influence or control third-party seller prices.
Okay, and the other?
There's about something called brand gating. It relates to agreements between manufacturers and Amazon that might disadvantage certain sellers trying to offer those specific brands.
In the FCO's view, the head of the FCO, Andreas Mundt, is quoted.
Yeah, he basically says Amazon runs the most important marketplace, has this key position to set the rules, and they're looking at how that might hinder sellers competing with Amazon's own retail side.
Makes sense. How did Amazon respond?
Predictably, they disagree. The sources state Amazon disputes the FCO's interpretation. They've filed an appeal.
But the ruling still stands during the appeal.
Yes, it remains enforceable. Amazon argues the retail market is super competitive overall, insists third-party sellers set their own prices, and says any actions they take against sellers are about customer trust and stopping fake goods.
This isn't the only regulatory pressure Amazon faces, though.
Not at all. The sources mention the wider context, like a long-running EU probe into how Amazon uses seller data, where Amazon's settlement offer wasn't seen as good enough, and a newer UK investigation, too.
And the fact that Germany is using these new powers is significant.
Very. This is only the second time they've used them against a digital giant. The first was Facebook, so it shows regulators are serious about using these updated tools to tackle platform power.
So wrapping this one up, why does this German action against Amazon matter to you?
Well, it could eventually impact what you see and pay for on online marketplaces like Amazon. Affect prices, choice, who gets to sell what.
And it speaks to fairness for all those businesses, small and large, that rely on these platforms.
Exactly. Plus, it's part of this bigger global story, governments trying to figure out how to manage the dominance of major tech platforms in our economy.
We've covered a lot of ground today, drawing from all those sources you shared, Chime's IPO strategy, and the state of fintech.
The incredible and complex world of brain interfaces with Paradromics and Neuralink.
And the growing regulatory spotlight on Amazon, especially in Europe, with Germany taking the lead.
These deep dives, using the material you provide, hopefully cut through the complexity and give you the essential takeaways.
Connecting the dots, highlighting what's important.
Absolutely. And maybe a final thought to leave you with. Thinking about these three very different stories together. Digital banking evolving, tech merging with biology, the fight for fair digital markets. What does it all say about just how fast technology is moving in 2025?
And that constant tension, right? Between pushing innovation forward and making sure we handle the impacts responsibly. Consumer protection, fair competition.
It's the central challenge, really. Lots to keep watching.
Indeed. Thanks again for sharing your sources with us. We hope this deep dive was useful.
If you have more questions or other topics you wanted to dig into, please do reach out. We're here to help.
That's a wrap on today's top stories. Remember, tech doesn't have to be complicated, and we're here to help connect the dots. If you've got questions or want to learn more, visit us at snarful.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time.